John Wesley Bready, page 321, christened them whither bound in his book, This Freedom Whence, England Before and After Wesley. Now he's talking about the rest of the empire, what it was then, the British Empire, specifically Canada. And this is on the impact of Egerton Ryerson, a name that was heroic when I was a boy, but is now vilified right here in Canada. In fact, the university called by his name has just had his name removed from it. The university in Toronto. It was in my day Ryerson Polytechnic Institute, Polytechnical Institute, I think it was technically called, back in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, until it became a registered university. And now it no longer bears the noble name of Ryerson. So we're not talking about that. Of course, Brady's writing this from the perspective of about, well, pre-Second World War England and Canada back then. Brady, by the way, was Canadian, so he's invested in this narrative, and he tells it here with great effect. Egerton Ryerson, the recognized champion of religious liberty and equality in Upper Canada, was born on March 24th, 1803, in Charlottesville, Ontario. Of Dutch Huguenot descent, he was the sixth and youngest son of Colonel Joseph Ryerson, a fervid Empire Loyalist, who after the American Revolution settled in New Brunswick, but soon followed the trek to Upper Canada, where, as a Loyalist officer, he was granted 2,500 acres of land. Ryerson's mother was a deeply religious woman of warm heart and open mind. As the Methodist and Baptist itinerant preachers were the first to visit and labor in their community, she was glad to take her children to profit by their services, and she herself was greatly influenced by their Bible exposition, their sincerity, and their devotion. But to his mother's own teaching, Ryerson owed his deepest boyhood debt. His story of my life confesses that in the religious instruction poured into my mind in my childhood by a mother's counsels and infused into my heart by a mother's prayers and tears, germinated the guiding aspirations of his career. When 12, in the year of Waterloo, Egerton Ryerson experienced a conversion which, crowning his mother's teaching, brought with it a vital change of heart. When 18, he formally joined the Methodist Church, whereupon his peremptory father demanded that he leave the Methodists or leave his house. Choosing the latter alternative, Egerton next day procured a post as teacher in the grammar school of the London district. That's London, Ontario. When 22, his father meantime being reconciled, he was accepted as a Methodist preacher, and within the next 4 years, Dr. John Strachan, soon to be first Bishop of Toronto, together with all his satellites in the family compact, was compelled to take notice that a new, brilliant, and disturbing luminary had burst into the sky. As early as 1826, the boy preacher began to expose the inaccuracies of Dr. Strachan's famous ecclesiastical chart and its supporting sermons. But the crying need of the colony was a free, just, and Christian press, and this Ryerson, backed by all the saddlebaggers of Methodism, determined to provide. Initial capital of $2,000 had to be procured. Undaunted, the preachers themselves raised half that sum. Their followers, mostly backwoodsmen struggling resolutely for meager sustenance, raised the other half. The Christian Guardian was born in 1829. Its growth represents one of the most pleasing romances in the empire's development. Within 2 years of its founding, it had achieved a circulation greater than the combined circulation of the 13 other newspapers at that time published in Upper Canada. From 1829 till the formation of the United Church of Canada in 1925, the Christian Guardian never missed an issue under that title. Since Union, that is in 1867, having coalesced with Presbyterian and Congregational organs, it continues publication in its old home as the United Church Observer. So the Union of Canada, of course, it was 1867. The Union of the United Church of these Congregational, Presbyterian, and Methodist roots was in 1925. So the United Church Observer, which goes on to this day, was the fruit of Ryerson and the Methodist ministry in Upper Canada, now Ontario. The Ryerson Press, now the property of the United Church, and the largest and best housed of all the publishing companies in Canada, is the lineal descendant of the little press created over a century ago by Ryerson and the Outback preachers. With the origin of the Christian Guardian, the handwriting was on the wall. But so blinded by self-importance was the family compact, that is, the Anglican monopoly in Upper Canada, that it was unable to decipher the language of liberty. The second need of the young colony was an institution of higher learning, open to all. As far back as 1819, the saddlebaggers had appointed a committee to take into consideration the important subject of a seminary, but for 10 years it had to be shelved by more pressing problems. Now, with the genius of Ryerson in an editorial chair, the matter was revived. Constantly did the Christian Guardian keep this matter before its readers. It called for an academy which would provide a good English and classical education, and wherein the stream of educational instruction shall not be mingled with the polluted waters of corrupt example. The dream of Ryerson and his supporters was liberal and truly Catholic. They envisaged a college where scholars of every religious creed will meet with equal attention and encouragement. And when finally their dream was realized, it was laid down in the governing rules that all students shall be free to embrace and pursue any religious creed and attend any place of religious worship which their parents or guardians may direct. At the Upper Canada Methodist Conference of 1830, definite plans for the college were formulated, and the staggering problem of finance was faced. As with the Christian Guardian, the preachers themselves took the lead and returned to their people for support. So encouraging was the response that on June 7th, 1832, the cornerstone of Upper Canada Academy was laid amidst beautiful wooded surroundings in Colbourne, now Ontario, and building proceeded apace. But unforeseen difficulties were ahead. Soon it transpired that the scheme would cost substantially more than $40,000, and meanwhile an economic depression had settled as a pall over the province. Market value of farmers' produce dropped to low levels, and many subscribers found themselves quite unable to fulfill their commitments. When the 1834 conference met, it was warned by its college committee that the unfinished buildings were in danger of being sold for debt. Then it was that the saddlebaggers made their superlative effort. Despite all that they had previously done, and though their salaries averaged barely over $200 a year, 50 of them came forward and signed promissory notes for $100 each, more than some of them then possessed. Nor did that half-year's salary represent the full measure of their devotion. Having won the right to solemnize marriages in 1829, they determined also, for the next 4 years, to throw all marriage fees into the college fund. Against such devotion, family compact and clergy reserve could never prevail. Here, 4,000 miles from England, and unobserved by the mother country, the evangelical revival was asserting itself against the lingering, stagnant assumptions of the 18th century establishment in church and state. A little earlier, when the Methodist Conference, through Ryerson, petitioned the governor, Sir John Colbourne, on behalf of their educational plans, that gentleman had the effrontery to jibe at the, quote, limited views of the leaders of societies who perhaps have neither experience nor judgment to appreciate the value or advantages of a liberal education, unquote. Later, when it applied for a royal charter for the academy, the law officers of Upper Canada replied tersely that, quote, the Methodist Conference was unknown in law, unquote. A royal charter, nevertheless, these preachers were determined to have, so Ryerson was dispatched to England to plead their case. The difficulties he there encountered were colossal, but ere he returned, the charter had been promised, and some little financial assistance through the Colonial Office as well. More on Ryerson and his accomplishments and the tremendous impact the Methodists had upon the growth of Canada next time. Put a link into the impact of Jonathan Edwards on America This is a name that was virtually unknown to me, even though I felt myself a well-read Jehovah's Witness. I'd never really heard much about this man who has been called the greatest mind in American history. Why was Edwards not part of my consciousness as a Jehovah's Witness? I'll put in a link to that question that Vivian and I tried to answer. We'll put the link into that specific video on your screen. See you soon.